Why did Santa go to the podiatrist? He had mistletoes. Hey, shh.
La 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 la.
Welcome back to Not Another Needless Sequel, where we watch movies and propose unnecessary prequels, sequels, reboots, and remakes. My name is Kane. With me, as always, is my co-host, my wife, and possibly a secret elf sent to fatten me up for my future role as Santa Claus, Kelsey.
Would I not be Mrs. Claus?
No. He got big before Mrs. Claus. They make a joke about it, how he asked her to marry him and then put on 200 pounds.
All right. What do I think the story was? How about we switch it up? What do you think the story was? We'll get started with the other line first, and then we'll get to that.
A man murders Santa Claus and faces hell because of it.
What is the audience guessing that we watched this week? This week we saw what happens when you kill Santa in the 1994's The Santa Claus, which is the story we already reviewed. You can say that line because I had a different opening if you want.
This is a mess.
Ask me what the story was. Just trying to spice things up a little. He's not coping well. He's not coping well with the change.
You're not a professional.
Oh, okay. Can you ask me what I think?
No.
Deliver the
I'm
line.
leaving all that in.
Deliver the line.
I'm leaving all of that in, so
Why?
it's already done.
Why?
I already hit that, what the story was about, with ease.
All right.
The opening to this movie is a shitty office party where you see a bunch of scumbag ass business people being scumbags at a party. They're cheating on their wives. They're interrupting women and pushing them out of the way of the mic.
I saw that too, and I was upset.
Just a horrible party. If anything about these movies makes me feel like Scott Calvin shouldn't be Santa Claus, it's the opening to this one. I'm just like, you're actually a bad person. I don't think you deserve this.
I actually thought the same thing, but then at the party when he interrupted her, it seemed like it was a bit in a way, like part of their sales pitch. With I don't agree with it either way, but
anyway, he works at a toy company. They had a great fucking sales season. But he's also at this stupid office party instead of being with his son. So he shows up late to get his son, Charlie.
And he does make up an excuse to why he's late, too. He seems kind of annoyed.
Well, he's a liar. He's driving there and he's like, oh, there's all this traffic. And he's leaning out the window, beeping and yelling. And you can see the road is empty.
Yeah.
Charlie also doesn't want to be with him. Charlie's like saying to his mom, you know, do I have to be here when you're going to come get me? That kind of thing. But it's just part of visitation.
It's kind of sad. And Charlie's talking about Santa Claus, and Scott's ex-wife Laura is married to a guy named Neil, and he's trying to ruin Santa Claus for Charlie. And one of my favorite lines is Charlie says, Neil doesn't believe in Santa, and Scott goes, well, Neil's head comes to a point. It's so good.
I believe the reason that Scott and Laura are not together is because Laura cheated on Scott with Neil.
Ooh.
There's no reason given, but Scott says, you know, your mom and Neil are naughty. And I was like,
that could have
Scott
been.
may be a shitty person,
I didn't
but
even notice that. I will say in the opening scenes of the movie, and really throughout the movie also, you can see kids that are elves.
Yeah.
And this is before he ever became Santa Claus.
you know, I have a piece of trivia here that we'll get to in a moment where I marked multiple locations where there's elves. But speaking of, I think Scott's a terrible person. According to the making of special, Tim Allen was miserable while shooting this film. It was shot in the summer in many non-air conditioned locations, so when he was in the full costume with the fat suit, the facial prosthetics, the beard, all that, he would get so hot and have to take breaks. And when he got too warm, he'd occasionally, apparently, forget that there was children who were playing elves and started like cursing and yelling. And, you know, I don't think he forgot there was kids around. I just think he didn't care. But also just imagine the amount of kids that were on set for this, just hearing him.
Yeah. They leave Charlie at the house, and Scott is planning on making an entire turkey.
Yeah, at 2 in the fucking morning or so. I don't
Yeah,
know.
the timeline is all off, but here's my thing. He burns the turkey, obviously, uses the fire extinguisher, and then they end up at a Denny's. But my thing that's crazy is they could have just eaten the 900 sides that he made for the two of them and just not had turkey. But instead, he got rid of the entire dinner. It showed a full spread on the table.
It kind of seemed like they were already eating, but yeah. They end up at Denny's and you see all the other like dads there that are with their kids
They're single dads too.
Yeah, who knows why. Several of those are sad. Obviously, one guy shows he has like a burnt hand. He also burned the turkey, and the waitress makes a comment about, like, oh, one of those.
Yeah,
But
sad dads this way.
sad dads in the corner of Denny's.
Yeah.
You can see it at any Denny's to this day. So they end up like going to bed for the night, and Scott reads Charlie a story. He reads him the night before Christmas. Charlie obviously is having this whole thing about whether or not Santa's real, and that night, of course, they hear someone on the roof, and Scott goes out there and scares the Santa Claus that's on the roof, and he falls off and dies.
He doesn't just die, he evaporates into thin air.
He becomes more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And he picks up a card that is left behind by that Santa, and it says to put on the coat, and the reindeer will know what to do. And Charlie's like egging him on to do it, and
all Charlie does is pout.
You hate Charlie, and I don't
like Charlie.
I feel Charlie is going through a lot. Charlie
is going through a lot, but it's not like his parents are newly separated.
I mean, we don't... But he's at his dad's house, who he doesn't like and doesn't want to be there.
Well, I wouldn't like my kid either if all they did was whine like him.
Well, you wouldn't know what it's like to be forced into visitation with someone that you don't like.
Touché.
And I feel that he's not doing anything that bad, but of course, from the viewpoint of a parent, he believes that some dude was trying to break in and has just died and is now gone. And so he puts on the coat begrudgingly. He climbs up on the roof, and there's a sleigh with reindeer. At that point, I think he has to suspend some disbelief and stop being such a dickhead to Charlie.
I don't think he ever discounted Charlie's belief in Santa.
Well, it's like at some point they are in the sleigh and they have now flown into the air and are at somebody else's house, and he's like, you got to try and go down the chimney, and he's like, I'm not going to do that. Brr, brr, brr. You want? And it's like, dude, either you're fucking losing your mind or this is real magic, so you might as well try it.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
he did it.
Begrudgingly. He yells at a child. He goes down there and there's a little girl there, and he's like, go to sleep. You're not getting any toys. And she's like, you're supposed to drink the milk. And he's like, well, I don't like milk. I'm lactose intolerant. Just bullying this child, ruining her life. She appears later on in the Santa Claus TV show.
She also appears again at the end of the movie because he said he was lactose intolerant, and she remembered. And so she set out soy milk, which he actually drank and thought it was nasty. But then he thought it was a sweet gesture.
It is. She was very nice, but I'm just saying he was not nice to her, I feel. So, they end up basically completing that Santa's Christmas with the reindeer, and the reindeer get them back to the North Pole. Now, the whole time, the reindeer are, communicating with them, so the grunting sounds that are used for the reindeer are reused SFX from the video game Doom, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
But they bring them back to the North Pole, and he's like, what are you doing? We gotta go home. And he ends up discovering, the North Pole elves, they all are like, hey, you got
a year to get your affairs in order.
And he is still in denial, which it's just that thing again where this Christmas movie again suffers from the whole thing where Santa's real in the world and yet somehow people don't know. They actually make a point in this movie to explain a lot of things, and that's something I've always really liked about these movies, even going on to the TV show, which I haven't seen the second season of the TV show, but they always try and explain little things that wouldn't normally make sense or be explained in movies about Santa. So they explain the fireplace. Not everybody has a fireplace, so he's able to just basically create a fireplace.
He's magic.
Yes. What do you leave for the kids? How do you know what to leave? His bag automatically has what he's supposed to leave as he goes into the house. And they also say, like I said, Judy, she's one of the elves, she says, most grown-ups can't believe in magic, it just grows out of them. Kids don't need to see the North Pole to know it's real. And they roll with that for the entire series. So when you're an adult, you just forget and you no longer believe in it. So like I said, that little girl that he bullies in the beginning, she is in the TV show, and he tries to talk to her, and she is freaking out and is like, well, who are you? And why are you in my house? Because she's forgotten. I like that they explain all that stuff, but regardless, Scott doesn't really believe it, and he wakes up back at his house the next day, on Christmas Day, wearing the pajamas he got at the North Pole, but is still kind of I don't know what happened. Maybe it was a dream. Charlie, unfortunately, goes and runs his mouth about this to everyone. And it's just like, my dad's Santa Claus. We went to the North Pole. And so everyone thinks
he's crazy.
Yes, and then it starts to become this thing where
everyone starts to blame Scott.
Yeah, so Laura and Neil, they believe that Scott is purposefully portraying himself as Santa Claus to force Charlie to like him more, because obviously Charlie didn't like him before. And from their point of view, I definitely understand how it seems like he's just manipulating Charlie, because they didn't get to see any of these things, and he starts changing. Like, he starts growing a beard, putting on weight. He starts even dressing like more jolly. There's actually a point where he's wears black Converse shoes most of the movie, and then once he kind of accepts that he's Santa, he switches to red Converse shoes.
Yeah, and red, bright.
Yeah, he's wearing red ties, like, just everything. One of the funnier scenes when he starts...
It also starts to know when he's like, Billy, nice. Jasmine, naughty.
Yeah,
this person, nice. He just knows. And that's something
knows.
that the head elf Bernard told him, is that he would just know, like, who was what. And they were going to allow him basically to, quote, work remotely for the year. And then after that, he would have to be at the North Pole permanently. And that was just so he could get his, quote, affairs in order.
Mm-hmm. So he also, one of the funnier scenes with that changing is he goes into work. Immediately, his boss starts fat shaming him. Like, can you
imagine?
They're
all like, are you good there? Did you have a good lunch?
Just, can you imagine if you maybe took a long weekend, went on vacation, whatever, you come back to work, and your boss is just like, Jesus, Scott, your weight.
Hey, fatty McFat fat.
And then, like, you're like, I got stung by a bee. And then you order a lot of lunch, and they're like, a bee? Like, my God. And that's the only thing they say to him the whole time. They just keep commenting on his weight.
Yeah.
It's such a horrible scene.
Something else I find funny is that he tells him to go to the doctor to, like, get something looked at because something must be wrong. And at this point, he's, like, put on 60 pounds. His hair is more gray. And the doctor just keeps making up reasons as to why that's normal. Mm-hmm. And then he listens to his heart, and it's not beating correctly. It's the tune of Jingle Bells.
Yeah. And he doesn't immediately hospitalize him?
No, he doesn't. He's like, oh, it's, like, beaten. That's good.
Yeah, at least it's going, I guess.
Yeah.
Just all these changes pretty much proving that he's Santa Claus, but it gets to a point where, because they feel that he's manipulating Charlie, Laura and Neil discuss taking away his visitation until, something changes about that, and they go to a judge. Charlie, being a stupid idiot, tells the judge, like,
everything. I told him about the sleigh, everything.
And so the judge, again, like everyone else, is like, oh yeah, this guy's crazy and is manipulating Charlie. So they take away his visitation rights.
I do want to say something about that, though, because right before court, he's looking in the mirror and just shaves his whole face. And this is the last time you ever see him try to prevent himself from becoming Santa Claus. It basically... The CGI's his entire hair back and his entire beard within a matter of seconds.
Yes.
And I just thought back for 1994, that CGI looked really good.
Yeah, it didn't look bad, but they, that's where they blew the budget compared to, like, some of the scenes with the reindeer and shit that don't look as good.
Oh, okay. They look good.
Well, I think the reindeer look fantastic up close, but when they'll do, like, a landing,
the
reindeer just look weird.
Poor, yeah.
I still, honestly, I don't even know what they do for the up-close reindeer, because in every movie they look pretty good. I'm assuming it's like a puppet or something.
Yeah.
So to actually look like Santa Claus, Tim Allen would undergo 4 to 5 hours of makeup and prosthetic applications to actually, be fatter and have the hair and all that. And it would take him 2 hours to take it all off. And like I said earlier, they were filming a lot of this in the summer and just in unair conditioned places. Like, I can see where it would have been miserable.
Yeah.
So Scott believes finally that he's Santa when he goes to see Charlie one last time, and Charlie's like, you have to believe, Dad, the kids are counting on you, that kind of thing. Like, I'll be fine if I have to be here without you, but you can't give up. And he has a change of heart, and he's like, maybe I am Santa, which, like, yeah, you're 100% Santa. Like,
he's the Santa Claus.
It's just... You have to understand that you're changing physically. At that point, you have to believe it. Plus, Bernard keeps popping in now. And they bring him to the North Pole. He's 100% in now, He's dancing at the North Pole. He's getting ready to do the damn thing. And then he also kidnaps Charlie, which is just a minor.
Charlie does call and let them know.
Yeah, I mean, but in their eyes, he showed up there to say goodbye and then was like, "Can I have a moment alone with him?"
And
then disappeared.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I know. He does kidnap Charlie, and then they fly back for Christmas Eve.
yeah, well, it like I said when we were watching it, I'm pretty sure they're gone for a year with Charlie, or not a year, a month with Charlie, and that's pretty horrible. But the cops are then searching for him as he is gearing up for Christmas Eve, and he starts doing his present or doing his delivery thing. And he ends up going back to Laura and Neil's to leave Charlie there, but the cops get him. So the cops detain him, and Charlie's left to freeze to death on the roof. And they send out like a special elf squad to come release him from prison. And
which they do.
Yeah, they get him out, and he goes to see Laura and Neil again and Charlie. And Laura and Neil then believe that he's Santa. Well, at least Laura does. And they basically make up, even though the cops, I don't know how they call off the cops. I guess that you drop charges against him. She, throws away their papers.
Their visitation papers.
But those don't throwing them in the fire, that doesn't really mean anything. It's still real. But everybody believes in him. That needs to, I guess. And then Charlie is sad about him being Santa because he can't see him all the time, but he got a special snow globe to where he can shake it and see him when he needs to. I will say that I always thought about that snow globe, it being weird that in the second movie, how, Charlie hates his dad basically, and I'm like, well, why you're not using the snow globe?
Give it to Lucy.
Yeah. So, with the ending of the movie, when, he leaves for the last time before he finishes his whole trip, you see a bunch of kid elves kind of just turn from the crowd and go running off. So elves are scattered throughout the movie, like you mentioned. There's a little blonde girl walking away from the window at the opening of the movie. The little boy putting his jacket on and wearing a red scarf as Scott and Charlie are led to their seat in Denny's. The girl walking behind the bench when Scott has kids lined up at Charlie's soccer game. The girl in the purple coat who walks by Scott and Charlie in the park when Scott wants Charlie to stop talking about the Santa Claus stuff. And the attentive little boy in the blue turtleneck behind Charlie's desk during show and tell. All elves. So, at the end, when they turn and walk away, to me it's and granted they kind of go over how he became Santa Claus in the show, but those elves, it was their mission to scout him and then ensure that he became Santa and everything went right, because they're constantly around him before he's even Santa Claus and then well after. And then at the end they leave.
Yep, mission accomplished, return to base.
Yeah, they were secret agent elves.
Movie is a 5 out of 5. That's my favorite Christmas movie.
For 1 week in November 1994, Tim Allen had the #1 movie at the box office, the #1 rated television show with Home Improvement, and the #1 New York Times best-selling book called Don't Stand Too Close to a Naked Man.
Nice.
With that being said, this is also Tim Allen's first leading role in a movie.
Well, it was great.
I gave it a 4.5 out of 5.
Listen, there were parts that are annoying to it, and I told you that yesterday. I was like, I feel like there's probably better Christmas movies out there, but this is by far my favorite Christmas movie ever. 5 out of 5.
So the only reason I gave it a
5 out of 5.
The only reason I gave it that 4.5 is because I think he's a shitty person in the beginning. And I'm not totally convinced that he didn't kill that Santa and now this is his own personal hell where he's forced to be Santa for the rest of his life. Because the Santa Claus thing, and this is something that the idea was first given to me, at least, from the Weekly Planet podcast. It's more like an invasive species that takes you over.
Okay, Venom.
That's exactly. It's like it's a symbiote. It's...
Scott was meant to be Santa, and my sequel will prove it.
But Scott...
My sequel will prove it.
You put the coat on, and then you no longer are yourself because you stop acting like yourself. You start acting like a different person. You start knowing things that you didn't know before. You start physically
I think Scott
changing.
always knew who he was.
I'm just saying. Would you put on the coat if you knew all that was going to happen?
Would I be a woman with a beard or man, I mean...
Okay, well, how about this? Consider this. If I put on the coat, would you want to be Mrs. Claus? Because understand that in the TV show, they make a point to explain that his wife can no longer remember her first name.
That's tough, but sure.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk through these different Santa Clauses in movies and see who you think is the best Santa Claus.
Tim Allen.
Hold on. I don't mean who acts the best. I'm not saying the actor. I'm saying as a Santa Claus and the feats that they have accomplished in their movies, or just whatever you can get from their movies. So, because obviously in this movie, The Santa Claus, it's shown that there are multiple people that have been Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm.
So, starting with number one, The Santa Claus, and you can use anything you can remember from the other movies as well. I would say he's a pretty damn good Santa Claus because he knows everything about all the kids. He gets everyone what they need. He has changed the hearts of people who didn't believe. And I think they even say in one of the movies, the elves say, like, we've never been happier, like, because of you, that kind of thing.
I agree.
Okay. The Santa Claus from the Polar Express.
My turn.
To go over them? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, fine Santa Claus, you don't really get to know the character, so he kind of already has that working against him. Seems like he's pitting children against one another, if you ask me.
The Polar Express Santa wants a kid fight club. Polar Express Santa also doesn't visit poor children, so you're banned from being Santa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Santa Claus.
Yeah,
Okay,
Scott stands above him for sure.
Okay.
The Santa Claus from Elf.
You've got to be joking.
What do you mean?
He literally asks Buddy to leave.
No, he helps Buddy because Buddy's not feeling like he belongs. And he tells him where to get pizza in New York. Okay, here's my reason why I think the Santa Claus from Elf, above all what I just said, why he's actually probably the best Santa Claus. No. Hold on. If you recall, towards the end of the movie Elf, Santa Claus is stranded in Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
They're sending cops after him on horses. The moment Buddy shows up to Santa and he believes it's the cops there, he turns around with a tire iron to fight them. So that Santa Claus is the baddest bitch. And
just because he's a bad bitch doesn't make him a good Santa.
I disagree.
No, he's not better than... Just think about it. Tim Allen's Santa Claus, he listens to what the elves have to say. It's a community. You can see because he's replaced as Santa for like every single movie. Every single movie, a robot Santa takes over while he's finding love just so he can stay Santa. And then Jack Frost becomes Santa Claus and everybody hates it as well. And he's a beloved Santa Claus for many, many years. And you're going to sit here and be like, someone's like, yeah, we basically took you when you were a baby and
Buddy the Elf crawled into his sack and he saved him.
And he never returned him?
He was an orphan.
How was he an orphan?
That's where he gets him, at an orphanage. But,
he would have known. The magic of Santa would have known who that kid belonged to.
Scott Calvin is not ready to throw hands with cops.
Yeah, he is. He has the elf.
I'm holding on this.
He has the elf. No.
He's better. No. We'll move on. We'll agree to disagree. The Santa from The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Like Jack Skellington is Santa?
No, the Santa Claus, the Sandy Claus that they kidnap. That fool got kidnapped, so he's not that smart.
No.
He gets kidnapped by 3 monstrous children, and...
I don't remember that movie very well. Like, I've definitely seen it, but I haven't seen it as much as the others.
Well, that's okay.
So I don't
I'm
have
here
a
to
ton
tell
of
you
input.
that that's his legacy, is he got kidnapped by 3 hoodlums.
Yeah.
Number 5 is Fred Claus.
So I actually feel kind of bad. I've only ever seen this movie like once or twice, but I do know that Fred was basically the black sheep of the family, and his family only ever cared about his brother, who ended up becoming Santa Claus. And you kind of have like a love-hate relationship with Fred Claus, because he's played by Vince Vaughn, and Vince Vaughn is always like the asshole character that you can kind of like and kind of relate to, but you're just not quite sure. I just don't think he brings the same magic that Scott Calvin does.
Well, I actually didn't mean Fred Claus. I just meant the Santa Claus in
Fred
Claus.
Shitty human. He's probably worse than the Polar Express Santa.
Unfortunately, due to the movie, he does succumb to a kind of like more human family drama thing, and it makes him, not desirable as Santa Claus.
Yeah, no.
So
Scott Calvin is the best Santa Claus. Thank you very much. We can move on.
Yeah, so wrapping up, the Santa Claus and the Elf is the best Santa Claus.
No.
Okay.
I'll die on this hill. Not many hills I'd be willing to die on, but this is one.
Yeah, so we'll agree that
this Santa Claus, Scott Calvin, is the best Santa Claus.
I just wanted to bring it back and say that the Elf Santa Claus is actually the best
But let's just spin it 180 and come back to Scott Calvin.
No, I don't think so. But this movie has 2 sequels, and 2 seasons of a TV show.
All good.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen the second season,
But
and
still gonna be good.
the beginning of that show to me was dicey. The moment I heard him say, "We can't say Merry Christmas anymore," I was like, "Oh, don't do this.
Yeah, I do agree with
don't
that.
be this show."
I
But
do agree with
it
that.
is a good show. I was rewatching some of it today, like as I was working on stuff for this. So, what is your sequel?
My sequel is called The Santa Claus SC Claus. Scott Calvin.
The Scott Calvin clause?
Yeah.
Like clause, like the last line of a contract for.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a origin story about how Scott Calvin was selected to become Santa Claus. I know that they kind of went over this in the first season of the TV show. Like, it let him know that Santa was supposed to die like that. That's how he's going to become Santa. I think I would change certain things if it gives more detail, because my story is going to kind of get into more detail. But I think it should start all the way back when Scott was a child. And Scott's dad left him and his mother on Christmas. And it obviously devastated both of them. He was an only child. He actually stopped having Christmas spirit and didn't ever care to celebrate. His mom was always having to work, picking up extra shifts at her second job to provide for the both of them, so he was always alone. While alone on one Christmas, he decided that he wanted to make cookies and leave them out for Santa, even though he'd given up hope and didn't really know if Santa was real. He heard a noise in the house, thinking it was his mom. He got up and went to
He heard a clatter?
Interrupting my sequel, but sure.
I just wanted to inject some Christmas spirit.
Oh, okay, thank you. He heard a clatter and went to
see what was the matter. Proceed.
Oh, are you sure? Like, you don't have anything else to add?
Well, I'll have to hear.
Oh, okay.
Comedy, you can't just. It comes at the moment,
Oh, okay. Okay. He got up to look around for his mom and saw Santa Claus himself eating cookies after he had left Scott a toy under his tree. This ignited Scott's not only belief in Santa Claus, but love for toys themselves, because it had been a while. Santa Claus never saw him. They never interacted. So he went back and met with Bernard, and the board decided that they would have the Scott Calvin clause in place, and Scott would become Santa. From there on, they manipulated his life with the elves to make sure that he would be pushed towards becoming Santa. For instance, the elves will always push Scott to continue his love for toys, but they do it in a way that continues to make it like it's his own idea. This manipulation causes him to go into the toy business, which we see in the movie, and then the sales business, which is also a job that he's passionate about. This is why he's going to be such a good Santa in the future, because he loves making toys for kids, which was his career before. And his developing personality after showing his love for toys will highlight a bunch of the flaws that we talked about. And so, like I said, it will highlight a lot of the personality flaws that we saw at the beginning of the movie. And we'll also see him and Laura and how their relationship fell apart in the midst of all of that. And they get a divorce when he has a young child. She'll then meet Neil, causing Scott to further isolate himself and bury himself into his work, which I feel like is kind of a point of the later Santa Claus movies. He buries himself in his work more, and like it causes some rifts between family, and then even after, like in the TV show and stuff, it kind of causes a rift there too. But the movie will ultimately end with the beginning of the first movie, which will be a flash to Santa slipping off the roof. The end.
I liked it. Mine is called The Santa Claus, The Identity Clause.
Oh, is he gonna have a crisis of identity?
Not quite. Santa's magic is fading fast as adults continue to not believe in Santa, and some adults even have begun telling their kids as early as possible that Santa isn't real. A big event affects several children when a mall Santa is accidentally unmasked on a news network for the world to see. As Santa's magic reaches a record low, Bernard goes into full panic mode as he warns Santa about what is to come. While most adults lose the capacity to believe in magic, some have been forced to forget to preserve Santa's secret. This worldwide trick uses Santa's magic, and as the magic fades, so will the spell. People around the world will remember every time they saw Santa, an elf, the reindeer, every time gifts or decorations appeared, and those especially close to the events of the first movie will remember that Scott Calvin is Santa Claus. Bernard warns that once everyone is aware of Santa, this will invoke the identity clause. This clause states that if Santa's identity is ever revealed en masse, that time will be reset to before that person took over as Santa. Before Scott can even figure out what can be done about this, he receives a letter summoning him to court. It's the United States versus Scott Calvin, as many are calling for his imprisonment. Scott shows up to court and is being charged with billions of counts of breaking and entering, espionage, trespassing, speeding, animal abuse, flying in restricted airspace, flying without a license, and 1 count of a hit and run.
Who'd he hit?
Grandma. She got run over by a reindeer. 1 count.
Yeah.
Most of the film shows Scott with an elf lawyer defending what he does.
What about adultery? Did they see mommy kissing Santa Claus?
I should have got that one in there. Eventually, just before Scott is to receive his sentencing, he gives one final heartfelt speech on what it means to celebrate Christmas, how Christmas used to make people feel, and what being Santa has meant to him. It almost appears the jury will say he is innocent, but after a speech from the plaintiff's ruthless lawyer, K.R. Ampus, the jury declares Scott guilty on all counts. However, Charlie, watching the trial closely, notices something isn't right with the plaintiff's lawyer, Mr. Ampus, and alerts Bernard. It is revealed that the lawyer is Krampus in disguise, trying to ensure Scott is removed as Santa. Bernard confronts Krampus, and Krampus gloats, saying he is the one who has been going around disguise, spreading the word that Santa wasn't real, to initially weaken Santa's magic, and now he's using his own magic to keep the world turned against him. The reason for Krampus's plan is because people have forgotten about him, as Scott has been so forgiving of the naughty children of the world that nobody fears him anymore. After meeting with Bernard and learning all this, Scott requests to have Krampus visit him in prison for a deal. Krampus can't resist the opportunity to gloat and meets with him. Scott proposes a deal that they play some Christmas games with one another, and if Krampus wins, he'll use his remaining time as Santa to help Krampus punish those on the naughty list. But if Scott wins, Krampus must help him avoid the identity clause and never again interfere. They play all kinds of traditional Christmas games. I don't know what traditional Christmas game, whatever you think a traditional Christmas game is, whatever your family does, that's what they do. Anyway, they play traditional Christmas games, and of course Santa, being the fun-loving one, wins, resulting in Krampus reversing all that he has done, and in fact helping spread the belief in Santa all year long, thus restoring Scott's magic and helping him rid the world of the memory of his true identity. Out of the kindness of his heart, Scott gives Krampus a special job at the North Pole, designing a new coal delivery system for naughty kids. The world is filled with Christmas spirit again, and the adults are none the wiser.
Yeah, yours is much better than mine.
They probably used Krampus in something, and I don't know about it, or I can't remember it. Because they use all kind, like, remember last week I went over some Christmas traditions, and I mentioned La Befana, the Italian thing, like, she's in the TV show.
Oh, she is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that house.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening. We do so appreciate it. If you want to talk movies with us, you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, and Twitter. We are NansPod everywhere.
NansPod?
If you'd like to vote on whose sequel idea was the best, come by our YouTube channel for the polls, or let us know your idea with a comment, tweet, or you can reach us at needlesssequel@gmail.com. Links, as always, will be wherever you're listening. If I could ask you for one thing, it's to share our show with someone and leave us a review. That is how we get new listeners. Of course, I also ask that you come back for more Needless Sequels. Next week, we're watching Black Christmas on Max. Today, I want to close with a line from the anime Demon Slayer spoken by the character Rengoku. If you are feeling disheartened that you are somehow not enough, set your heart ablaze. Alright, take care of yourselves, everyone. We will see you next week.
Bye!